Hi, in this session we're going to learn about solid principles. There are two main reasons why we learn about them. The first one is practical, and the practical reason for learning solid principles is that they help us build high-quality software. Solid principles are 5 principles, and we are going to learn each one of them, and each one of them gives us hints or just general direction about how to think and reason about our code to make it better. Now, there is a second reason, and the second reason is that actually solid principles are often mentioned in the interviews. So people want to know, the companies that hire you, that you can build high-quality software, and one indicator for that is whether you know or are aware and can implement principles like solid. Now, in this particular session, we are going to learn about first principle, which is called single responsibility principle. Now, if you want to learn a bit more about solid in general, they were created, so the principles were created by Robert C. Martin, who is also called sometimes Uncle Bob. He's an American software engineer and author of many books, and has a very significant contribution to software development field. You can also see that they're pretty old already, but they are still being used and applied in everyday software development. All right, let's go to single responsibility principle. For this, we have a slide in advanced iOS Figma, and also I will use the Xcode project advanced iOS, where we are going to play with the code as well. All right, so let's dive in. Single responsibility principle states that each function, class, or module should only have one responsibility and reason to exist, or problem to solve, etc. You can see how it is very similar to separation of concerns principle, where it states that we should break our code into smaller pieces with the, I think, with a single concern or reason to exist. So each of the modules or classes that we want to build, they should have one responsibility, right? Or one reason to exist, one responsibility area. This is what it is. It's basically exactly the same thing that single responsibility principle tells us. Now we have already seen how it is applied on the function level. So here in this example, we had a big function that had at least 3 or 4 different responsibilities. For example, here we would like to migrate the tracking ID, the GWT, and user email for some reason, right? We migrate them from user defaults to keychain or to a different place inside user defaults. Now, the way we refactored it when we discussed a single responsibility principle is we have split the code here into smaller functions, where one function would have only one responsibility. For example, this function's responsibility is to migrate GWT, and this function's responsibility is to migrate whatever key we are providing to it from user defaults to keychain. And then the original function's responsibility is now to orchestrate with 2 other functions. So this is how we applied the separation of concerns principle on the function level, but single responsibility principle would tell us to do the same exact thing. Now we are going to go to the class level, and for the class level I will go to Xcode, to the playground folder inside the solid page and solid playground and single responsibility principle subpage. Here we have a class handler, and you can see what it does. Here, imagine we would have real functions, right, that would do something, and Then we have a function that would orchestrate with all of the functions that we have. So first we would make a request. Let's say this would be a networking request, or we would read from a local database. So we're getting the data. Then we want to parse the response. So we get the data and we want to process it into a format that is acceptable for our application or for whatever use case we have at hand. And then let's say we have an additional database where we want to store the processed information. And currently this class does all of those 3 or even 4 things. And if we want to comply with single responsibility principle or implement it, we would like to have one class having one responsibility. And since it has more than one, we want to split it. So here's how we would like to do it. Here is the implementation that would follow single responsibility principle. Now, for each of the functions here, request, parse, response, and save to database, actually what we want to do is we want to create an additional class. So for example, for the request, we would make a class, let's call it request service, right? Or request maker, whatever you want to call it. We would move the function to this class because we want to unload the responsibilities from this class to somewhere else. And here, this class at the end would have only one responsibility, and this responsibility would be to make the request. Now, to make the code still work, we would like to have the request service declared here, right? And let's say we will not use dependency injection from the start. We are just going to initialize, and I'll call it request service. So now the handle function would call request service.request. Okay, this is a good start. We still have 2 other functions, so I would like to extract them into different classes. So response parser would be the second function, the second class, sorry, and here we would move the function there. Now we can create an additional field for response parser, and we would like to use response parser here. We can also call it just parser. I think it will be fine as well. All right, and now we have a function save the database. So let's create a class, let's call it database service, and we can move save the database there. Same thing here, so database equals database service, and here we could say database dot save to database. All right, this way we implemented single responsibility principle because now we have 3 different classes here, and if you look into them, they have one single responsibility that you can immediately tell from the name. For example, database service might not be the perfect name, but for example, response parser, you know that, okay, this thing is responsible for parsing the response and nothing else. This is the important part. Here, the database service, maybe the better name would be, I don't know, like database persistence service. So we kind of want to persist something, or saver, even though maybe saver is not the best name. Then we have request service. From the name, judging from the name, we know that this class is only responsible for making the requests, right? And if we would be talking about a specific example, maybe we would have something like settings request service, if this would be talking about the service feature, for example, sorry, not service, settings feature, right? So settings request service, settings database service, something like that. And then this class would use all of the other functions. So this class responsibility would be to orchestrate with all other classes and produce a result. So this is how you implement single responsibility principle on the class level. Here, for example, I also use dependency injection to provide the dependencies, and here maybe the names are slightly different, right? So requests, parser, persistent manager could be available as well. All right, this is pretty much it. So anytime you see a class that would have, for example, view controller, right? It has a lot of code. Try to think, hey, what parts of the view controller am I able to extract to a different class? Sometimes it's hard to do when you have, for example, subviews that has to be connected to a functionality, right? But a lot of the times, for example, why we use MVVM architecture, one of the reasons is that we try to extract some of the functionality which would then use other things in our project from view controller to the view model, right? And on other levels and in other classes, the principle would be the same. So we check the class and we see, hey, how many responsibilities does it have? And in cases when it's more than one, we want to extract them into separate classes. This way you achieve single responsibility principle and better code quality overall. All right, that's it for single responsibility principle. I hope it was clear, and we see each other in the next one. Ciao, ciao.